report recently came out that Texas has got a big budget when it comes to what their roster could be in 2025. Do we believe that? And if we don't believe that, what do we think is true about Texas and how much they could be spending when it comes to their 2025 roster and their ultimate effort to go win a national championship, which we all understand that's what this next season is about in Austin. So we'll unpack that together right now. Before we do, though, Texas fans, make sure you're subscribed. You subscribing lets us know you want more Texas content. We appreciate y'all in advance for being dialed in because college football doesn't stop. This show doesn't either. So the Houston Chronicle puts out a report that Texas is set to spend in the range of $35 to $40 million on their roster in 2025. That's per Kirk Bohls. Chip Brown of Horns 24/7 comes out and says, well, hey, I got a source here telling me that's not actually the case. I'm not here to give you a definitive report and tell you that Kirk Bohls is right or that Chip Brown is right. My take on this here, if I'm reading between the lines, I think the right answer in terms of like what Texas is actually spending is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of what the Houston Chronicle is reporting. Not saying it's $40 million or that it's $35 million, but we can all, align on this. It would be pretty shocking if this report was out there and Texas is dealing with like a $17 million roster. Doesn't that just not really make a ton of sense? Let's use our common sense here. I think that's probably closer to $35 million than it is $20 million, but I digress. It would also make sense now when you put together this number of Texas having a $35 million roster to factor in what I think they're probably trying to spend when it comes to their 2026 class, which, of course, they haven't signed yet, but I think it's probably fair to look at the numbers that way and see how that could add up to a $35-ish million roster, or at least close to that. But the number to me isn't really that important as much as this story is, because if I'm a Texas fan and I read this report, even if it's not $35 million, even if it's just somewhere in the neighborhood of that, aren't you just like, okay, good, finally. Yes, we hear all this talk around Ohio State and $20 million roster. That's what it takes to win a national championship. And then I see a report, whether it's true or not, that we're spending close to double that. At the end of the day, this report tells me Texas is playing ball. And we already knew that. You look at them having the number one recruiting class a year ago. Promise you that was not a free $99 price point. You talk about the roster retention they had from this most recent portal cycle. Promise you that probably cost a chunk of change. I'm all for this. I am all for Texas saying we have a goal to win a national championship. You're telling us it costs in the range of $20 million. Here's what we're willing to spend. Let's go play ball. I'm all about that. And I think a lot of people will see this and feel some type of way about it because college football for the longest time had nothing to do with NIL, at least above board. It was something where you go recruit your tail off and you go get the best roster possible based on relationships and development and coaching staff and all those things. That still exists. I promise you people aren't going to go play at Texas if they were rolling out there with a 4-win season every other year. That's just one side of this. But I think when you talk about modern college football, weren't we always sort of investing a lot of money in when it came to adding top talent? Like instead of having a certain dollar amount go to a top player at the high school level or the portal level, wasn't that money just going to putting a waterfall in your weight room or putting a big screen TV in your locker room or whatever it was, stadium renovations? Wasn't there always a lot of money changing hands when it came to trying to add talent? Now we're just actually putting this money towards acquiring the talent itself as opposed to trying to get something else in your building or in your stadium to entice that player to come to your school. So there's that part of it. But I think the biggest misconception around where we are right now in college football and NIL, I love the fact that right now how much you care about your football team can directly correlate to what your team does on Saturdays in the fall. I love that because so many people are going to say, well, JD, this just favors the big boys, right? I mean, I suppose in some sense it favors, Texas because they've got a lot of money to throw around, but like Memphis, G5 school, FedEx money. Let's go get in the game here, brother. Texas Tech, a Big 12 school, not necessarily what you think of when it's like a blue blood brand, but they're very much so playing ball with that oil money from what we can gather. Putting the finishing touches on a top portal class from this past cycle. If you care about your football team, you put money towards your football team and the roster and all those things. Like how much you care has never been more impactful. If I'm a fan of a certain school and I care more than putting whatever dollars towards that next pair of shoes, or maybe you don't want to pay for private school. I don't know what your priorities are, but if your priority is your football team's success on Saturdays over other priorities, you put money towards that and you have a chance to go win a lot of games. I think that's a pretty straightforward way to go about this. And I think the word fair maybe gets overused in the world of sports in general. Like, don't complain about not being at the country club if you don't want to pay your dues. If you want to win national championships, it is becoming increasingly clear this is what it takes. This is what it takes, man. You want to have a top roster? It costs a certain amount. Ohio State was getting dunked on last year for having a $20 million roster. Not by us, but by some folks saying, are we sure that's good for the sport? They just bought a national championship. If you can buy a national championship, then it's on you to go pay that price. And you still have to play the actual games. Like, let's not pretend that Ohio State didn't lose 2 games in the regular season last year. Like, paying for your roster doesn't ensure success, but it does ensure you to be in a certain tier to then have a better chance at success when you look at this whole thing from a macro point of view. So going forward now, Ken and I were talking before we got rolling here. Y'all, this is not stopping at $20 million from last year for Ohio State or in the neighborhood of $35 million for Texas this upcoming year. It's only going to increase. Because whoever wins a national championship this upcoming season, I promise you, there will be a story out, whether it's during their playoff run or before the season or after they win the national championship, of right around what their roster cost. And I promise you, other people across the country that deal with money, whether it's a GM or an AD or a person in charge of a collective, whatever, will say, if that's what it costs, let's go get that and then some to put towards our football program, to put towards our recruiting apparatus, to put towards development, all those things. This is modern college football. And so we'll see how this whole thing trends, but I think the more you care, the more you're able to care financially, it's going to equate to wins on the football field. I'm here for it, man. It's a free market. So make sure you're locked in. Make sure you're subscribed. Let us know your thoughts about Texas and what they are allegedly spending on their roster here per the Houston Chronicle. Again, I don't think it's exactly that number, but I think even being close to that says a lot about how serious Texas is about winning a national championship in 2025 and how serious Texas is, period, about Longhorns football, in case we needed any other indicator. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. We'll keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.